Thanks to DraftKings for sponsoring this video, where they are giving out $100 million in prizes, with $1 million going to a single person. Go to your room. Don't come out until you're 120 hertz. You always do this. You're such a disappointment. How many tries do you need to get it right? So I'm the first to admit it. I've been hard on Google for the Pixel line of phones for years. And it's not out of hate, it's out of love and knowing what the Pixel line could be and what it should be. The perfect marriage of hardware and software, delivering the best camera experience in industry. And the Pixel line is generally delivered on some of those things, while leaving others just kind of gaping holes, whether it's screen, price, performance, or some variation of all of those. But sort of the phones that have been the exception to that have been Google's A line of phones, the 3A, and now the Pixel 4A. And this one is almost no compromises. At a $350 price point, Google has delivered, I think, on the Pixel promise, delivering an amazing camera experience, really solid software, now at a price that's accessible to everybody. But quite frankly, there's not much here to not like the Pixel 4a. Let's just cut to the chase. Camera is what matters here with the Pixel 4a. 2020, despite being a garbage year, has been a great year for budget phones, which is a really good thing considering some flagships are coming in at around $1,300. And Google took an interesting approach here, and their competition is doing some different things. So look at Apple with the iPhone SE. That's all about the power of the A13, and the trade-off for the lower price point is the chunky looks and kind of outdated design that comes along with it. OnePlus is back in that game with the OnePlus Nord. Despite not being available in the US, you're getting more of a flagship feel with a lower price point. The 4A undercuts both of those from price, and its mission is very squarely on the back. So while there are a lot of other phones sort of in that price point, I did want to see how the 4A stacked up to the Nord and the SE in cameras, which I think is one of the most important factors that go into anybody's sort of phone buying decision. And you can see that all of these are good photos. The iPhone SE got a ton of praise for its almost no compromise cameras. OnePlus has very clearly been stepping up their game. But both of those phones, despite being more expensive, I don't think can hold a candle to the quality of the photographs you get from the 4A. Seeing the quality of the photos that came out of this, my jaw was on the floor. And I'm not one that's that easily impressed anymore from camera phones in general. But there are a couple shots that really drew my attention. So this shot here of my daughter, what you might not know about this, it was extremely bright outside, and you can still see her very clearly. A lot of phones at any price point have a really hard time dealing with this scenario. You can see photos of my son inside eating his breakfast. The portrait mode looks incredible. He's got curly hair, which is notoriously hard for sort of those portrait modes to cut out the curls. This did an absolutely amazing job. And also things like night mode are here, which do, again, like you'd expect, a really good job. I feel like a broken record. It's good, it's good, it's good. Every photo I took was some version of good or great. That's not something that I could even say about phones that cost well over $1,000. Now on the flip side of that is video. Video is fine and acceptable, but it is nowhere near the quality that you would get with the photos. But I will say the microphones actually were pretty good. These pictures came out so good that I kind of just got curious to see how they would compare against like the flagships, phones that cost sometimes $1,000 more. So it's kind of blind test time. So I'm gonna put two photos up and you could pick which one looks better to your eye. And then we'll tell you later on which one was the flagship and which one was the 4A, but just take a look for quality. So a few different scenarios. So outdoors, sort of normal lighting with plenty of sun coming in. You got some indoor shots here showing you what it looked like when you control the lighting. A few more of those. Got some nature shots, of course. And then night mode. How does night mode look to your eye? And pay attention to things like contrast ratio, HDR, how photos just look generally to your eye, how it handles color, so to figure out which one's gonna look better to you. So results time, B was the flagship for all of these photos. And A, I guess appropriately, all came out of the 4A. And regardless of whether or not you picked A or B, I think it does, again, drive home the point that this is a $350 phone that competes in some ways very well with phones that are 2-3 times more expensive. If you've been following my videos for a while, you know I am big into sports. My username is John4Lakers, and with sports mostly being shut down for a while during the current pandemic, it sucked. But sports is back, and I personally could not be any happier. I've been playing fantasy sports in some version for 11 years. So DraftKings is a brand that I am very familiar with and one that I've actually been using for a very long time. If you don't know what DraftKings, it's kind of a fun way to take fantasy type sports to the next level. So I'm pretty stoked right now on the football season starting. I tend to draft Rams heavy. I picked up what I think is the best dynamic duo in all of the NFL in Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, with an eye on rookie Van Jefferson as sort of a sleeper pick. But if you follow sports, you know anything about sports, you want to get into sports, I think DraftKings makes watching it more entertaining and more fun. It kind of adds another layer to enjoying the game that you guys are already watching. And the amount of cash that can be won here is totally staggering. It sounds weird even saying this. DraftKings is giving away up to $100 million in total prizes, with one lucky person taking home $1 million. Download the DraftKings app on iOS or Android, sign up using the promo code John Rettinger, and then just enter the DraftKings free football survival pool. Collect anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 in prize instantly as soon as you do that. And again, with one lucky winner claiming a $1 million cash prize. So obviously the cameras are really good on the 4A, but that's not the only thing that matters, especially at that $350 price point. So I'll talk about the feel, the aesthetic of the phone. So first thing when you pick it up, it is light. I mean, it almost feels like a toy in your pocket. I'm used to bigger phones, so my opinion may be totally skewed, but it feels incredibly tiny. Plastic back does somehow feel premium. The phone doesn't feel like an inexpensive device. And you can tell that Google spent a lot of time with attention to detail. Even the buttons feel satisfyingly clicky. I mean, listen to that. You don't get that level of tactileness even on phones that cost 2-3 times as much. So credit definitely goes to Google there. I actually really like the rear mounted fingerprint reader. And I've talked about in the past how I must have weird fingers because they tend to not work with fingerprint readers. I had no issue at all with the sensor on the back of the 4A. And there's a lot of other things to like about the phone too. It's got a headphone jack, for example, which is awesome to have. The stereo speakers sound surprisingly good. Feel of the phone has been really good, but the sacrifices Google made to get there, so taking away things like wireless charging and IP68, I think are very fair trade-offs to get to that price point. One thing I found interesting with the 4A is the screen. So 5.8-inch FHD OLED screen. I honestly would have thought Google would have gone for an LCD panel. So having sort of that OLED screen was really nice to see. And it's a surprisingly decent screen. It's not the best out there, but amongst phones of this price, it looks really good. It's really nice. And it's not just nice for a less expensive phone. It's really nice for almost any phone out there. Obviously the blacks get really black. The colors were plenty bright. You don't have any high refresh rate, which I think you can expect for a phone of this price, so I didn't miss it. Would have been nice to have, but again, sacrifices have to be made. I'm very willing and eager to make that sacrifice to get to that really awesome price point. One area of sort of the Pixel's history where I think Google hasn't delivered has been on that software experience. And maybe a little bit worried to experience the 4A and how it was going to be with a less powerful processor. It's got the 730G here by Qualcomm, and it's got 6 GB of RAM. And I was actually been, like the rest of the phone, been very impressed with the power and performance. So I do want to give Google credit. I don't think they cut any corners with the RAM. 6 gigs is really a nice amount of RAM for a device at this price point. Now on a flagship, you would expect more, but they rammed this, if that's a word, very appropriately to sort of make up for that 730G. I was able to do anything without really noticing any speed lags. There were some occasional stutters, but once things loaded, the speed was very good. I was able to play some like games on it, playing back videos, web browsing, whatever. Chances are you'll never notice that this doesn't have, you know, the 855 or 865 processor. I really give Google and Qualcomm credit for making a pretty powerful feeling phone, despite not having the price tag that usually accompanies things like that. So weirdly, the battery is a 3140 milliamp hour, which is bigger than the Pixel 4. And with that 730G processor, you can expect battery life is actually pretty decent. Whereas on the 4, you couldn't even really get through a full day. I mean, as you can tell, there's not that much to nitpick or dislike about the 4A. I think they fixed a lot of the issues with the 4, namely battery life, and the sacrifices they made to get to that price point are very fair. From a hardware standpoint, the 4A is a home run. So I said it when the Pixel 3A line came out, and I'm saying it again here with the 4A. I think this should be the Pixel line. It's a phone that I'm excited to recommend to people again. It's the best of what Google promised when they launched the initial Pixel at an amazing price point that makes it accessible to almost everybody out there. The one thing I can say about it though is that A moniker, from a sort of a totally psychological standpoint, makes it feel like an inferior product, like the iPhone 5C, for example, or the 10R when the iPhone 10 came out. And now listen, this is a big proclamation, but if I was in charge of Google, I would make this and an XL version of it the Pixel. That would be the Pixel line. I would get rid of sort of quote unquote the flagship with the top end processor. I would make these the phones. I think Google would sell hundreds of thousands, if not millions of devices with that proposition. And they're able to compete, I think, head to head against what Apple's doing from an ecosystem play, but now at a much lower price point. This is a phone that achieves its goal. It gives you amazing camera. It gives you good performance. It gives you good enough battery life. It gives you a decent enough screen. For again, I keep coming back to a $350 price point. This is a $450 phone. I'd probably be saying the same thing. It is an amazing value, an amazing piece of hardware, and an amazing phone that I can wholeheartedly recommend to just about everybody.